systems. So what's Globus? It's a secure, reliable service. More than 150,000 registered users rely on Globus. More than 150,000 registered users rely on Globus. So what's Globus? It's a secure, reliable service. With the Globus platform, you can easily incorporate robust capabilities. And if the data is sensitive, no problem. Globus can be used to manage protected data. With Globus, you can easily share your data without having to move it or copy it. With Globus, subscribers can easily move and share. And if you have any more questions about Globus, visit Globus. More than 150,000 registered users rely on Globus. More than 150,000 registered users rely on Globus. If this sounds familiar, you're not alone. Many thousands face the same challenges every day and solve them with Globus. So what's Globus? So what's Globus? It's a secure, reliable service. With the Globus platform, you can easily incorporate robust capabilities. More than 150,000 registered users rely on Globus. More than 150,000 registered users rely on Globus. And if the data is sensitive, no problem. Globus can be used to manage protected data. With Globus, you can easily share your data without having to move it or copy it. With Globus, subscribers can easily move and share. And if you have any more questions about Globus, visit Globus. So how can you get started using Globus? Anyone can use Globus right now for free to transfer files between Globus-enabled systems. So what's Globus? It's a secure, reliable service. More than 150,000 registered users rely on Globus. More than 150,000 registered users rely on Globus. So what's Globus? It's a secure, reliable service. With the Globus platform, you can easily incorporate robust capabilities. And if the data is sensitive, no problem. Globus can be used to manage protected data. With Globus, you can easily share your data without having to move it or copy it. With Globus, subscribers can easily move and share. And And if you have any more questions about Globus, visit Globus. More than 150,000 registered users rely on Globus. More than 150,000 registered users rely on Globus. If this sounds familiar, you're not alone. Many thousands face the same challenges every day and solve them with Globus. So what's Globus? So what's Globus? It's a secure, reliable service. With the Globus platform, you can easily incorporate robust capabilities. More than 150,000 registered users rely on Globus. More than 150,000 registered users rely on Globus. And if the data is sensitive, no problem. Globus can be used to manage protected data.
What up, though? How we doing today? Shout out, as always, to the people watching this in the future. Greetings from the past. What up, Alina? Today we're going to be talking with Professor Q, which will be the first conversation that I have had on this channel with a published author. Professor Q is known from many chats and from Twitter. And do do do. Do do do. Do, do, do. There we go. Let me put myself where I belong. There I am. Electronic dance music from deviant subculture to culture industry. This is currently on pre-order, but it is an interesting subject matter that is close to my heart, because if you know me, you know that I love me some EDM, and like even the ones I don't like at first, like dubstep or jungle. Still not the biggest fan of breakbeat, but all of it like eventually kind of grows on me, right? So I look forward to reading this book. And I hope it does well. Professor, yeah, did it make small Chatterino, not big Chatterino? There we go. Professor Q has also been published in Salon.com. 5 articles, and they did a piece together with Homozygote. And if you don't know Homozygote and you don't follow Homozygote, what are you doing with your life? And speaking of Homozygote, Segway Master, Pro Streamer, and Homozygote is currently penciled in based on their work schedule, but they are
anyone can use.
They are going to be coming on for one of my introduction interviews, like what I did on my birthday and that other time. So it should be like super cool. Still waiting to hear back from Universal Discourse. Supposed to talk to them this week. Was hoping for tomorrow, but have not heard from them. They have an ebb and flow to their life right now, which is complicated. One of the VC, absolutely. And then we're going to be talking with Corey Campbell 84, who has been interviewed on this channel before. And excuse me, I just noticed a grammatical error, and I need to fix it. Fixed. Okay. There should be a comma after donate and a comma after can. Because if you eliminate if you can from the sentence, please donate to help the Buffalo Mutual Aid Network. It's still a complete sentence. Sibilance. Yeah, Corey Campbell 84. Corey Campbell, like, I've got some some heavy hitters coming in. So this is kind of cool. It's like, people with the education and the background and in the knowledge to explore other aspects of artificial intelligence. And I'm interested both in, what they have to bring to the conversation, and also, picking their brain a little bit, like seeing what the future looks like from their point of view. And I'm standing at the table, and it isn't even covered by your rule. It's a George Carlin joke. If you get it, you're super cool. Excellent. Everything is set. Why does my video look like Okay, that's better. Yeah, if you were here from the beginning, I hope you enjoyed those videos that I showed at the beginning. As always, the video and any links will be posted in the Discord. So you should absolutely join the Discord. But like, especially the first one, like, my love for recursion, and that video I think does it big time, and it has a nice soundtrack to go with it. By the way, never finished executing on that particular command. You should follow Corey Campbell. Corey Campbell's also in the medical field, and they've been on this show before, and I look forward to talking to them. That'll be on Friday. So yeah, I'm excited. I hope you're excited. I hope the people watching this in the future are excited. Because, again, my VODs are very popular. Or at least popular from my standpoint. Okay? Like right now, let's say we have 3 people in chat. I get 11 times the views on my VOD. I get 20 times, 25 times. Show up. Come say hi. We're nice. We're cool. Or do you just like listening to me at like 1.5 times speed? Have I come to that point? And there's something I don't understand about, like, okay, I'm going off on a little tangent. What up, Jenny? Is when I look at my analytics, right? And I don't know if I could show you this, so I'm not going to show you this. But like, how viewers found your stream. Views from outside Twitch. Direct other 86%. Okay. Facebook 5%. I post on Facebook my link and whatnot, in the hopes of bringing in some of those people. And then a very small amount, 3%. Not it's one person, right? But Keffels GG, like, did 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 Keffels feature a video on stream? Like, be kind of cool. So, hi to the one potential Keffels viewer. And if this ever gets hi Keffels, I'm pro Keffels. You know, like, could have been from emotes. Yeah, yeah, that's cool. Like somebody popped off an emote and then they clicked through and to see what it was. Oh, it could have been a Wiggler. Keffel saw my Wiggler. Sorry, I'm fangirling out a little bit here, but you know it's whatever. And your boy is Mr. International. I got like, I mean, uh, like you know, small. I'm modest, right? Like I'm accurate. Small viewerships, one view, one view, one view. But like, okay, 85% of my viewers, my views, excuse me, come from the United States, and then 9% from Canada. And then I got UK, Germany, Australia, India, Poland, Mexico, Ireland, Thailand, Turkey, Brazil, Denmark, Latvia, and Netherlands. Your boy's Mr. International, Mr. Worldwide. Love it. Love it. Baby Shark. If you've been on Twitch for a while, you might know Professor Q from back earlier this year, which in COVID time is like what, at least like 5 years ago. Um, Professor Q used to be on Ministry of Science, and another segue. Um, I've reached out to Greg, the peer review from Ministry of Science and elsewhere on the internet, and they're interested in coming on as well. So like, yeah. This is the content I want to provide. I want it to be entertaining. I want it to be educational. I want you to have a good time, but also learn something. I want you to have your ideas challenged, not necessarily changed. I want you to just to to know why you know what you know, right? And believe and know why you know what you believe, something like that. But yeah, looking forward to it. Big things in 2023, right? Oh, I should have played that video. All right, stick around after we're done talking with Professor Q because I need to show you this video. I've shown it to you before. We're not gonna play it now, but your theme, as opposed to making New Year's resolutions, making a theme, making like direction and influence, but not goals which you might not be able to hit. You might not be being reasonable with yourself, and things like that. So it's a good video. Please stick around afterward. It's only like 6 minutes long. I could probably run it now, but I'm not gonna because that's rude. So yeah. Baby shark, do 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 do. Shark doo 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 doo. All right. Well, because I'm not going to run the video, I have just run out of content. So I'm going to see if Professor Q, if you are within the sound of my voice and have returned from attending to the things, then let me know. There he is. And I will drag you into interview. And I will open the chat and I will join the chat and I will hit the X and I will say check, check, check. Professor Q is not muted. We'll do it live. We'll do it live. And then he bopped back over there. Try restarting your Discord. I know when this thing happens to me on my end, it's because I had Discord open and then need to restart it. Baby shark doo 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 doo, baby shark doo 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 doo, baby shark doo 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 doo, baby shark. In other news, we have a fourth cat in the house. Our niece is going to be staying with us for at least the rest of the school year, and they have a cat named Snuggles. Snuggles has thumbs, and if you're a cat person, thumbs are awesome on a cat. He's back. Check, check, check. Oh, I see you. I cannot hear you. Let me reformat the window. Professor Q doing the Hassan imitation. You go into your settings on Discord. Can I hear you? Go into your settings on Discord. Make sure that you've updated your microphone, not to default, but to the proper mic. Let me make sure that mine is set to that, just in case I'm the problem. The camera works, so I would imagine. There he is. I heard something.
Yeah, I don't think it's coming through on my mic. I think it's coming through on.
No.
Okay, I'll have to use these. I'm sorry that the audio is going to suck. I don't know, but I lost you. Now I can't hear you.
Check, 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 check. Baby shark, do 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 do. Baby shark, do do do.
Okay, maybe that fixed it.
There we go.
You know, you'd think that Discord would be a lot easier to use since so many of you use it.
Yes, and at the same time, there's like Twitch introduced their own integration that they want people to use, which is like basically the same thing. So I know that Twitch doesn't care if it gets fixed. Whoop. I have a floating bar. No.
Okay. I've never had this problem before, so
Yeah, now your audio's not coming through on my end. What the fuck? Okay.
This is why we do it live.
all right. Well, if you can hear me,
I can hear
I'm coming
you.
through okay. We're good to go.
Okay. Bring your volume up a little bit more. Give me a check, check, check. You can't hear me. Oh. That's what a stroke of genius looks like. I came up with an idea. Oh. Thank you for your patience, everybody.
Sorry, I don't have any audio from you. The only way, in fact, I don't even have it coming from your stream, so that means it must be me.
And you rechecked your settings and everything?
Oh my gosh, nothing. Okay, now I can hear the stream at least.
Okay. How delayed are we?
I see your green box, but I don't hear anything.
The end is near, and so we face the final curtain. I'm doing it. I'm in Discord and I'm clicking things, and I should just sit and be patient.
Say something now.
Saying something now.
Okay, I got that. So
it's fixed, and we don't know how, and we don't care. That's always
Yeah,
the way
it
that I
feels bad to me that I'm going to sound like I'm in a tin cup. But what?
we work with what we have, right?
Wait, your audio went dead on me. I'm really sorry about this. I have
You're
no.
okay.
This has happened to me before.
Flexibility and patience is a valuable attribute for people to have. Oh, I heard something.
Yeah, that's the actual speakers. I don't know if that's going to give you feedback or not. I hope not. Can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine.
Okay, I can hear you as long as there's no feedback. We're good.
Okay. There is no feedback, at least at the moment. You do cut out a little bit here and there, but we'll do with what we have, all right? Nope. No, nothing. I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing with you.
Okay.
All right. I got voice.
Okay. I'm going to have to take a look at this later. I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to scuff your content.
You're okay. It's not a leftist stream if it's not a little scuffed, right?
Yes, so, yeah.
Okay, so first off, if you want to introduce yourself to the people and who you are, what you do, where they can find you.
So I'm Professor Q, epic shit poster on Twitch, award-winning even. But in real life, I'm a college professor at the University of Missouri teaching classes in sociology. So if anybody tuned into James' stream earlier, we do not claim vouch. But yeah, I've been studying the internet since the 2000s, really. Oh man, old. Yeah, mostly looking at how the LGBT community is used online platforms. So basically, I've got a couple articles on Grindr. And I've always been kind of hip to what the internet is doing to society. So even though I've studied a lot of different areas, the theme is like, how does technology interface with society, and then what does that mean? Like, what does it look like? Mm-hmm. And there's some really fascinating stuff out there. It's weird to think this, but I was one of the like early adapters to using social media and using online spaces as data. Mm-hmm. And even today, in a lot of sociological studies, there's not a lot of people really kind of doing that kind of work, which is odd to me because like we're clearly going in that direction.
Is that indicative of any like in the same way that Congress is slowed by the age of the people involved? Do you feel that academia and people making the decision to seek out that data is affected by the age of the people involved?
Yes. So as much difficulty as we had with audio, I've been to a number of conferences where the whole thing has just like completely blown up because people don't know how to use technology in kind of rudimentary ways. You know, I think I'm old enough to remember when PowerPoint first became a thing that was being used in higher education. Mm-hmm. And at that time, it was like the most groundbreaking thing, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's a lot of older faculty who have probably never even been on a dating app, and good for them. But you know, they just seem so out of touch. There's an old critique of this actually. If you all want something to read, it's titled "The Sociological Imagination," written by C. Wright Mills, and one of his many criticisms within sociology and within higher education and academia in general is that you probably heard of the ivory tower critique, and it's just this critique that people who do the studying of society often are in their nice cushy offices and never have to interface with the public. And so they have this perspective that is like not even, you know, it doesn't even speak to people. Like it's really great amongst your bougie colleagues who are sipping wine and having cheese, but it's not necessarily going to speak to the masses. And what's funny about that is there's a lot of people who are part of that critique, and then they wonder why nobody reads their work.
Right. So, segueing into what we're here to talk about with the AI, how do you see those people who are, for a certain value, slowing a particular field of research? How are they reacting to AI, and how is AI and machine learning and all the things making itself known in the fields that you're in?
So you have to kind of seek those people out. And I'm lucky. I was at a conference. It was the last conference before the lockdowns. Well, the lockdowns. And I happened to stumble into a session where someone was given a keynote, and I'd never heard of this woman or her work. And she's a professor at Princeton. Her name's Rua Benjamin.
Mm-hmm.
And her book is titled Race After Technology. And I'll post it in the chat,
Okay.
link to her site. But essentially, what her argument is that these systems that we create, whether it be AI, the algorithm, a dating app, that they are embedded with certain prejudices because they're programmed by humans. And
Right.
so one of her data points that she references is the fact that there were self-driving cars that would not recognize people of color as humans, and thus, hey, I should stop and not run them over.
Mm-hmm.
There's a number of Google's AI for photo recognition. So like when you upload your photos to Google, it says, hey, this is a picture of your best friend, Joe Bob, right? It wasn't registering the faces of people of color as faces.
Mm-hmm.
And it was because it only recognized whiteness as the unique
Right.
thing. And I'm sure there's probably some really complicated stuff behind that about how the technology works, because I'm a sociologist, not a data scientist.
Right.
But the effect is the same.
Right. And ultimately, that's what it comes down to. Is like, it can be whatever it wants to be. It can be whatever, like they can say, we did it like with no biases, but that's inherently impossible in the world as it exists. I mean, one of the things we talked about, you may have been here for the stream, was how AI is acting as a mirror of ourselves because it doesn't know the things it's like not polite to talk about, right? So it like, do you see yourself interacting with AI in your field, like for data gathering and analysis, or is it like, I know you use complex computer models, but is AI going to bring anything to the table, at least that you can see?
So I can't remember who you had on, but there was an interesting conversation you were having about someone was specifically talking about writing papers and how there's certain parts of writing
Mm-hmm.
that suck, and they were making the jump to how there's certain parts of art that are just merely replicating or doing kind of more menial tasks
Mm-hmm.
that you have to do right now because it's all on you.
Mm-hmm.
And it got me to thinking, like, hey, what if this could help me write? Like, what if this could take away some of the issues that I'm having with writing?
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you that there's been some attempts to incorporate AI in the kind of work I do. So I primarily do qualitative methods, content analysis, different things, less kind of statistical stuff and more of the kind of fun stuff that turns people on to sociology.
Okay.
And they attempted to do something where you could upload an interview transcript and then you could have the computer tell you basically what the data says. So it would basically code it for you.
Okay.
And like when I was a student, you would literally print out these line, this transcript, and then you'd go through with a highlighter to figure out what your themes are. And that's pretty burdensome. So the thought that a computer could help us out was like, oh, wow, this could be really cool, right? This could save us a lot of time. I tried it for my dissertation work and it sucked because it could see that certain words were coming up. There were certain patterns. And so it would lump that as a theme when the theme may not have even made sense to like what I was trying to do. I saw somebody do a paper on punk rock that tried to do something along these lines, and they weren't finding any meaningful data. Like they could tell you how many times a particular reference was made to like guitars, right? But then the author didn't go that extra step of telling us, okay, well, what the fuck does this mean?
Right.
And so, like, that's the problem, I think, right now is, like, people are forgetting that third step. And that's a big step that a lot of really seasoned academics forget to do. They don't go that extra mile because that's what makes sociology so hard. Neil deGrasse Tyson has that tweet. I know some people don't like him, but I'll use his fame to make my point. And he says, physics is easy, but sociology is hard because it takes into account human beings. And that's kind of the point, is we have this kind of extra layer that we have to analyze in social sciences of meaning. And that meaning making doesn't always make sense. It's not based in rationality. It's not something you can fine tune with a equation. It's something you have to really experience.
Right. And like, to associate that with, our discussions around art, that sounds to be like that similar aspect, is that there is something still, and may exist, maybe probably the biggest issue, the biggest hurdle to overcome, is that there is something inherently human about humans that it is difficult for something that is not human to understand.
Correct. Yes. And see, this is where we get into some really murky territory, because I'm a social scientist, right? So I can tell you a lot about like the experience of particular groups of people that I follow and study and why they maybe are led to the particular beliefs that they believe. But I don't know what that extra thing is, because like you're basically asking me, do you have data on the soul?
Right.
Do you have data that the soul exists? No, I don't. And my usual response is I don't even tread into that territory because there's no data, so I can't really weigh in on it.
Right.
However, as a human being, I'd like to think that there's something more to the human experience that is not reducible to some kind of equation. And so, I don't really know kind of, I don't really know how one would even go about kind of doing that, right?
Yeah, they're like, we understand that there are things, like love has a lot of chemical components to it, but that there may be, and we definitely want there to be, some extra non-quantifiable component that guides these interactions outside of simple chemical analysis and whatnot. Did I? Oh,
correct.
Okay. So, with what you do, and the limited capacity for AI in that aspect of it. You do see a value, potentially anyways, to AI for, the statistics nerds.
That's already happening. There's programs called Digital Humanities,
Mm-hmm.
and they are using a lot of this stuff in ways that's kind of interesting. But again, even the best of those papers, they still aren't really like they can tell us some really descriptive things. So I see it used a lot with Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll they'll follow some Twitter hashtags and then compile 5,000 tweets and see if there's patterns of particular topics and then kind of map those out. And that's actually pretty useful. Like the particular paper I'm thinking of looked at QAnon and like themes within QAnon. And so that was really helpful in a descriptive way, charting out and looking at how QAnon spread and what were kind of the themes within QAnon. And so if you were someone who's like really unfamiliar with it as a topic, this would kind of help you get up to speed a little quicker.
Mm-hmm.
And I see other things like that. As far as on the qualitative side, I don't really see much happening other than that auto code feature that exists within some qualitative statistics packages.
Mm-hmm. And the ability potentially with things like ChatGPT to help in writing papers and things like that. Because anytime you're writing, there's a lot of just filling in words, and having that automated would be nice.
Yeah. So, and I'm trying to think of like if I could get AI just to write my methods for me, like that, even in that little section. So like all of the papers I publish, well, unless it's like for a news outlet or something, but all the scholarly work I've done has to have a methods section in it. And so, like it doesn't take me long to write that, but if I can have a AI program write it up for me and do it well, then for sure I'd be happy to kick it over to them for that. And honestly, a lot of people don't know this, but a lot of really successful people who write, one of the things that they do is they hire a copy editor. And so in some ways, that's just like having an AI, right? Except the copy editor is a person, whereas AI is machine driven.
Right. So with the one of the
I think I just fixed my mic. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, I bet that sounds a lot better.
It does sound better.
Okay, thank God. Fuck. So yeah, all I did was I removed the mic from my settings on my PC and then plugged it back in. It saw it, and we're good. So
yeah, no, it's always the way with the electronics. Turn it off, turn it back on again, see if it works, and it fixes.
I apologize to the chat for the tinginess that was happening. So
I'm glad we got it fixed. That's what's important. One of the things with AI and automation in general is the reduction in the number of jobs. And if you were here for it, I said that as an artist, I felt I was really safe 8 years ago, and now there's like direct challenges with AI art. Do you feel that and definitely more so on the quantitative side, your field is relatively protected from that, at least in the short term?
So let's back up there just a second, because you brought up some interesting stuff about art that I was kind of wanting to chat just a little bit about.
100%, all on you.
Um, there's a particular concept that I work a lot with in my work. It's called the culture industry hypothesis or thesis. And basically, it was a critique lobbied by a bunch of Jewish German intellectuals that fled Nazi Germany to the United States and ended up in Hollywood. And in Germany, they were studying how Hitler rose to power, and they were particularly interested in the kind of cultural changes and aesthetics that Hitler used as a way to gain power. And so, for instance, I bet a lot of people here on Twitch know Hugo Boss designed the SS uniforms, and they were specifically designed to be sleek looking and to muster up this kind of national sense of pride. And like, if you go to Berlin, for example, you can really get a sense for that in some of the architecture and buildings that are still around, of this kind of aesthetic presence and power, right? And so when they came over to the United States, they began studying all of that over here. And so in my work, I apply it to the study of electronic dance music. I got that book coming out in March on that. And it is basically an analysis and critique of what happened with that music subculture. It became commodified. It became something that was interjected with a lot of capitalist ideas. And then it became a multi-million-dollar industry that is almost unrecognizable from its roots. So here's where it gets really interesting. So one of, as they're unpacking this idea, there's I don't want to say a manuscript, but there's a part to this culture industry thesis that they wanted to draw attention to. And that's that you cannot, or like, the culture industry can rarely produce top-down administered culture. So an example of what I mean by that, boy bands, right? Boy bands have a particular shelf life, and then people get sick of it and they're done and move on to the next thing. That's because those boy bands and that authentically produced art, or that rather top-down produced art, it doesn't elicit the same response as authentic art, right? You always have to have that spark of creativity, whether it be a minor flaw or something that tells you that this thing is real, right? That this thing is from the people, not a mass-produced corporate psyop or whatever. And interestingly, I think it's one of the tactics that a lot of the QAnon folks used. Like, if you look at their stuff, we often joke at how gritty it is, but like, think about their narratives that they're promoting. They're against the mainstream media. They're against authority, right? Well, what better way to convince people you're not part of that system by producing content that is a little scuffed, right? And I think that is ironically a kind of saving grace for your, like authentic art, right? Or art produced by humans. It still is going to have that creative spark, because AI it still can't generate that same kind of meaning and that same kind of understanding of what it's doing, right? And so, like, there was an AI produced art image that looked like something out of a horror show, and like there's like this woman and her mouth's open, and she's got like people as teeth instead of teeth. I mean, it was horrific. The thing gave me nightmares.
Right.
But it's kind of like that. Like, they know people respond to something, and this kind of looks like the general idea, but it can't. It still can't get the thing right.
Do you remember way back in the AI when Google released that? It was some kind of filter, and you would apply it to your pictures, and it would make them look all like tripped out. Like, do you remember that, or am I from an alternate universe?
I kind of get the general idea. I think.
Yeah, it was like weird multicolor stuff, and then like people would do iteration after iteration of it, and it would eventually produce like eyes in weird places. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Google filter. Go with Trippy. See, this is where an AI would really become come in handy. It could just feed me a bunch of shit.
Exactly, right? You could have your stream could be produced by like an AI robot that is an assistant.
Yeah, yeah. Deep Dream. That's what it was called. Um,
Hmm.
Let me switch over to just for a second so that chat can see these background things. Like it would produce all these weird artifacts and stuff like that. It was an absolute trip.
That's where
Um,
that came from. Okay, I'm familiar with the kind of aesthetic, but
mhm.
I didn't realize that was a Google thing.
Yeah, yeah. Deep Dream. That was, like I want to say like at least a decade ago or something like that. But in these times, it's so hard to be sure when how long the time has been. Um, so if it's like 3 years ago, don't at me, chat. Um, so do you think that AI is going to make it easier for something like a top-down um kind of thing because it doesn't have to be authentic? Like, could the AI analyze enough data to give something that, okay, people like this and people like this and people like this, so let's kind of ball that up into one thing and give it to them. And it only has to last like 5 years in the current capitalist climate.
I mean, I think we're already starting to see some of that pay off, right? Like Netflix. I had kind of suspected this, but someone confirmed it,
Mm-hmm.
and they could have been wrong because I didn't look it up, and it's not
Sure.
necessarily. I'm interested in it, but it's not like it's not an area of focus at the moment. I'll put it
Mm-hmm.
that way. Um, but Netflix apparently knows how to build shows in such a way that it basically um, uh, it makes it so it draws you in.
Mm-hmm.
Like it knows like the story needs to have an arc right around this time and leave on this kind of note because it it wants you to you know engagement, right? They want you to keep watching.
Right.
Like they know what it's going to take for you to binge watch a whole series. And um, they all their shows now are kind of follow that same algorithm. And so here's what will happen is for now, people might not notice, but eventually after the thing becomes formulaic,
Mm-hmm.
like people are going to start going, what's up here? I mean, we're already kind of starting to see that people are already starting to get a little disenchanted with um, things happening from different culture industries that use the same kind of tactic, right?
Mm-hmm.
People like reproducibility and standardization of cultural products, but the issue is the culture industry always has to maintain that kind of balance between authenticity and spontaneity and standardization. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's kind of this push and pull. Um, so that I don't think they'll ever be able to completely snuff authentically produced art out. But it may change what's going to happen. I mean, look at Disney,
Mm-hmm.
right? Disney is like a key kind of reference point we can point to. They're known for this kind of standardized product that they churn out, and you know what you're going to get. You're going to get a story about some Disney princess that is runs down on her luck, and she's trying to find Prince Charming, and the whole story is going to have a happy ending, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so um, they've been the most successful at it, but for the most part, right? Um, most adults accept that going into it. They're not necessarily looking for something that's mind blowing. I think it's why people in the Star Wars community are so pissed off, because they are seeing this kind of creeping Disneyfication of something that they love, and it's robbing it of its authenticity.
Now, is it possible to look at this, we'll call it the Netflix algorithm, in the context of not, or of like a rule, like in order to craft a particular thing? Because the nature of like sitcoms, right? Sitcoms have been around since the black and white days of television. They have a relatively similar formulaic quality. They last about 20 to 25 minutes. You will have a conflict that begins somewhere in the beginning and it'll be resolved by the end of the episode. And people are still watching sitcoms. So could that not... Go ahead.
Yeah, so so Adorno and his contemporaries who developed this idea of the culture industry, they predicted this. They predicted your very question some 50 years ago. They knew we would be talking, and they predicted it. So here's kind of their take on this. And they had a term, it's called pseudo-individualization, right? So pseudo-individualization. And basically, like if you look at... I do this in the sociology of sport when I teach it. Like if you look at two teams, like, I don't know, the Indianapolis Colts and the Kansas City Chiefs, right? Like, let's strip away all the stuff, but what's the difference between these two teams, right? They both play the same game. They are both, have really skilled athletes, right? All that's different is the branding, right? That one has a Chiefs logo, the other has a horseshoe, right? At the end of the day, they are all the same kinds of things. And so, but what happens is all of those symbols, all of that kind of extra stuff, it basically makes it so it forms a connection, right? It forms like, and not to... I don't know that I want to tread on this, but you can even look at Twitch in some of the same way, right? Most of you all are doing much of the same thing. It's just you have a slightly different branding,
right?
And there's other things that I'm starting to learn about Twitch. That's one of my next projects. Is I want to write a book on Twitch. Those things are part of the equation, right? And as we've developed since the 50s, since the advent of the sitcom or even the radio program,
right,
we've gotten more sophisticated about how to do that. And the more sophisticated we can make the whole process, the less likely it is that you're going to recognize it for what it really is.
So the no, I had a thought and I lost it. The what did these
here, I can go another way.
Please. Like I just hit a total brain lock. Go ahead.
So you had a second part to your question. I think you're wondering about what this is going to do to sociology or to academia. Just kind of focus on the algorithm.
Yeah.
So we are starting to see this. So a lot of people don't know this, but there's a we are evaluated. I'm not, because I'm just a lowly teaching assistant professor, not one of these hoity-toity, research professors. But their outputs are measured, right? And by measured, what I mean is like when you put an article in a journal article out, they track your citations. They track whether the article's mentioned on Twitter and various news outlets. How many times you're cited is a huge thing. But here's the thing. The algorithms that search this data out. They don't care if you get a bad citation or a good citation, just that you got a citation.
Right.
And so one of the things that's starting to happen is academics are, some of them, not all of them, but they often change their research trajectories to be more pop culture.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm guilty of this, by the way, so don't let me fool you. Like, I was not studying QAnon but in my defense, you know, the only reason I got sucked into QAnon was because members of my family were, and so then I became fascinated and wanted to understand it. But, you know, Carpe pointed out, this focus on engagement, like that's what's happening in academia is the people who are granted tenure and are the most prestigious, they just care that they're getting some kind of engagement, whether it's bad or good, right? You know, it's probably one of the reasons Jordan Peterson got as far as he did in his career. He was writing about something that people were interested in. Didn't matter that his work was not necessarily the most empirically grounded, but, you know, people were clicking, people were paying attention, and that's what the university cares about.
You mentioned QAnon and pop culture, and I asked the question: Is QAnon like our first pop culture cult because of how it, especially at the beginning, it was like totally okay to be kind of QAnon, right? Like because it hadn't gone as far down as it had, and because of the nature, like I know that some of the people that I interact with were doing like the save our children kind of thing, and they weren't like doing full on Q, but they were like right there on that surface level. Do you think it's a pop culture cult?
So you're tapping into something I've given a lot of thought to. So there's been people studying conspiracies and extremism for a really long time. And now all of the sudden our our mainstream news focuses on it, right?
Right.
Our, you know, I think a lot of the streamers on Twitch focus on it in some way.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a theory in sociology, it's written by a British scholar whose name you're probably not gonna care about, but his theory is called the media amplification model, and basically, he argued that punk rock was a production of the media. Like punk rock itself didn't actually exist until the media came involved and said, "This is punk rock. This thing right here."
Okay.
And
that hurts, but go ahead.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Oh, yeah. I didn't really think that through, did I? Yeah. Well, so it was the fear, right, of punk rock that he was really talking about, not necessarily like,
right.
There is a little element in there of like, hey, we were just the underground culture. Like his point was, we're just part of the underground. We didn't have a name for it early on. Then the media come along and they gave a name to it, and thus, you know, I think there's a bit of that going on with QAnon. I also think that there's perhaps something else behind this. I think there were some government agencies, and I don't want to go too tinfoil hat on this because I have not really got a lot to back this up on. But there were a lot of people who saw something and then made use of it. And I think, so one of the things I've been giving thought to is like, does media, like the media's focus on this, is it doing more harm than good? Right? Like, is this constant cycle of what is QAnon up to actually promoting it instead of diffusing it?
Right.
So for instance, like a lot of these right-wing guys like Jordan Peterson, Brett Weinstein, intellectual dark web figures, they will go on shows that they know they're going to get destroyed on, and they don't care that they're going to get destroyed. Right? They just want to get their name out there because they know there's going to be a certain percentage of people that will click on their content, and then a certain percentage of them will be like, "Oh, hey, these guys sound really interesting. Let's find out more." And then they're, devoted followers. And so I think there's a bit of that going on. Is it our first our pop culture cult? I would say possibly, but if you look back to like the Manson family, like when that whole kind of story broke, I mean, even today, it's a big deal, right? People are very interested in Charles Manson. How could people be so into something that's clearly wasn't right? The other one's Heaven's Gate, right? People still talk about Heaven's Gate today. And actually, a lot of people reference QAnon as the first internet cult. Heaven's Gate was using the internet and websites and whatnot early on. So this isn't the first time we've seen that either.
Right. But since we're bastardizing the term punk rock anyway, there is a punk rock nature to the presentation of some of the QAnon drops, right? Because they're like the counter culture, and they are like subverting the authority, and this has led to that conservatism is punk rock meme that went around, which no one should believe. Do you think that was intentional, or was it just the way that it came out?
It's so funny you should mention that. I just submitted a paper on this today.
I'm good.
As a matter of fact. So definitely the counter. The original paper was called Q Left because I was noticing there was this groups that might otherwise be considered leftist maybe 20 years ago were suddenly promoting the ideas of QAnon. And specifically, I'm talking about yoga studios, psychics, and alternative religious groups. I'm thinking UFO cults.
Right.
When you actually start to look at them, what they're really tapping into is they're tapping into what I call countercultural tendencies, right? So it's the anger, right, of the counterculture of being, the man is the man, and we need to bring down the patriarchy with no real concern for how they go out doing it. Just they know that that's what they want, and fuck how we get there, right? Whereas a true kind of leftist punk rock aesthetic would say, hey, wait a second. Yeah, demolish the system, but also, right, replace it with something that looks like this. And this is my critique of the left in its current form. And it's actually been a critique since the 60s. I'm reading a couple books on that right now. Is that the right has always had a much better time at articulating what their vision of the future looks like. The left has always not. We've never really been able to do that. Like, what does our vision of the world look like? What do we want to see? And articulating it in a way people can wrap their brains around. And here's the really weird, or I guess, I don't know, heartwarming thing. I don't know. If you actually sit down and talk to the most hardcore conservative people about like what it is they believe and what it is they want, there's a lot of points of intersection with what people want to see. Like if you actually sit down with someone one-on-one and say, hey, let's talk about the homeless, right? They'll start out and they'll be like, oh yeah, it's awful. I hate it. These bums need to get a job. And you can be like, well, yeah, but like, let's think about this. Let's talk about this. Do you really want, people to be fined for not having a house, right? And or being put up and locked up in jail or prison? Some of them will say yes, but a lot of them I would like to think will think, no, I don't want to see people, get kicked out of their house, or I don't want to see people go homeless. And those are the things I think we could really focus on and maybe get some attention drawn to. rather than just this, oh, you're a leftist, I don't like lefties, fuck you.
Right. No, and it's one of the things we talk about on this channel a lot is like that you should understand why you know what you know. You should build yourself up to the beliefs that you have, not grab onto an aesthetic and just because it sounds right. Like, because that's what happens with exactly what you're talking about. They know that they don't like the establishment, like, they don't like corporations or whatever, but then Tucker Carlson can turn them into, then that's why you need to vote Republican, right? Which is, arguably the worst of the two corporate parties that we have.
So one of the things I love to do is I love to I go to the gym, and I always they have one screen Fox News, one screen CNN, and I love like getting on the treadmill between those two screens and watching Tucker's monologues against whoever he's opposite of that night, whether it be Don Lemon or Anderson Cooper or whoever. Because it really you can really start to get a sense of how we live in such different realities right now. And that's always been a concern or a thing in the media, but I guess, and again, I'm not really doing this like empirically, but
Sure.
It would be a fun study to look at like the top 100 themes of Tucker Carlson versus CNN, because I think you would get a really interesting kind of insight into what's happening.
Yeah, like you said, the average person, the average person is just arguing with the other average person regarding aesthetics, right? Like, we both want, food, housing, clothing, all the basic needs met. It's just how we go about it and how that is like, something that we can structure into an actual system. And like you said, the system as it is with capitalism and everything else, kind of, it has an ingrained advantage which allows conservatives to point to it and say, we want a continuation of this when everything was good is when we did this, allegedly. Where the left is more like, yeah, we're going in this direction, and then we need to check again once we get so far to see how we need to course correct and like that. And that can be difficult to really wrap around I don't want to. I'm using propaganda in the informational sense, is to do a propaganda campaign around.
So there's a really good book on this called Fantasyland, and it's basically about this. It's about how how we've been lied to about our history and how this has produced this distorted vision of our world that's not based in any empirical reality. Like, the conservative media, and to some extent, maybe even the more left or center leaning outlets have this fantasy land, right? This they, if you watch Tucker, you would think that Leave It to Beaver was real, right?
Right.
That was a fiction, right? And so they want the reality that TV showed them.
Right.
Right. They don't actually want that reality but they don't know, right? Because they've been taught history is a certain way, right? And it's just not. And that's a failure it's a product of our educational system getting cut so much, and the textbooks being written, or not written, but told, hey, if you want us to pick up this textbook, you have to cut out this section or rewrite it this way. There's a great documentary on this about the Texas School Board of Education and how they basically dictate to the rest of the country what vision of history we're going to be reading in high school.
Right, because of the volume of the purchases and everything else.
Right, exactly.
The and you might like have some insight into this, and I hope you do. The youngers of today tend to have a better relationship with technology, and they don't have the living under the Cold War aspect of their aversion to, things like communism, socialism, these words. Does that allow them to, like, first off, to get around the books that they might be reading in school to get access to new information that isn't covered in school? And does it also give you the impression that, like basically that the kids are all right in the aggregate?
I think some kids are all right. So again, I like using personal experience for a lot of what I do. It can be a great starting point.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely branch out and get empirical data. But my nephew is a really interesting example of this. So, he has probably one. I mean, I don't want to give away too many details, but
Sure.
very extremely conservative family. They don't necessarily. One of his parents is not vaccinated and refuses to be vaccinated. Well, he's been up in his room his whole teenage adult life on Twitch, where he apparently found Hassan
Mm-hmm.
and some other leftists. And for Christmas 2 years ago, he asked me for a copy of Angela Davis's The New Jim Crow and other stuff by Karl Marx. And I was like, yes, yes. And so, I of course I obliged and was like, here, you need this copy of Das Kapital. You need,
Mm-hmm.
these books are more accessible. And now whether or not he's read them, I don't know, but he has them, right?
Right.
And so that gives me a little bit of optimism that somehow they're reaching these ideas despite lack of access.
Mm-hmm.
But we should still keep fighting that fight. I mean,
Sure.
There's a copy of the latest Mother Jones, which has an article in there about Mothers Against Libraries. And it's a organization that's trying to get particular books banned, and they have a lot more power than I really understood or realized.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I knew they existed, but I didn't realize the scope. And so, we definitely need to be on guard, but also, like, it's easy to get kind of wrapped up in only participating online.
Mm-hmm.
But getting out there in your local community is we need you. We
Mm-hmm.
need you to be at these school board meetings to voice. I mean, like, imagine if you're on a school board right now getting hammered from all these lunatics, right? Just having one person get up there and say, hey, look, I'm not like these people. These people are nuts. I appreciate what you're doing, or just providing a counter narrative. That's got to provide some, a little bit of relief. And, I'm trying to do more of that too. Unfortunately, I live in an area where, that kind of participation is much more difficult than you might think living in a college town.
Right. No, but it is like you say, when you are, like, to go back to the CNN Fox aspect of it, when you are only exposed to one kind of conversation, then you are going to think that that is the whole of the conversation. And continuous exposure to that for these people that are on the school boards when all they want is for these people to be quiet now, like, because it's getting out of hand, then you start to bend in that direction. So, yeah, showing up to your school boards and your local elections and participating in your local governance, all these things have a tremendous value of that participation. So, using that as a segue, with AI, one of the things that we talked about earlier and talked about on previous episodes is how AI, because of how it's programmed, can come off with racist because it's shining that mirror to us. Is there an argument for when things like ChatGPT and Midjourney and whatnot come online for us to access, that we as leftists should participate in that in order to make sure that our voice is heard in its evolution?
So there's a couple interesting cases, most of which I've forgotten, but the one that I remember is some, what I want to call them, leftist disruptors, for lack of a better term, wanted to fuck with Google. And so they strapped like 100 cell phones to like remote controlled cars and made it look like a particular street was like flooded with traffic, and it the Google Maps rerouted people because it was seeing all these phones going, oh hey, there's a lot of people here. And like those kinds of strategies for resistance are so crucial. And also, like, just look at what the right's doing. The right is following that playbook. Those used to be leftist strategies, right? Of like, and I'm thinking of like Alex Stein. Like, he's probably the best illustration of this that I can think of off the cuff.
Right.
All his stick is previous leftist things, right? I'm trying to think of who the two guys were that infiltrated the World Economic Forum and gave a presentation.
Was that the Yes Men?
Yes, the Yes Men. Yes. Okay. Yeah. I mean, like, the right is using a lot of that shit right now, and it's driving me nuts because I'm like, this was our shit, man. We had one thing.
Right.
And you took it.
Yeah. So, like, excuse me. So that's one of those aspects of it is like, you know, oh, I'm not going to interact with ChatGPT because it's going to put people out of jobs and all the other things, which is I would call a short-term aesthetic goal, and not in the pejorative aesthetic, but like just that it feels leftist. Protecting someone's job today is a leftist ideal, these kind of things, but that in the long term, you are ceding ground to something that is going to overtake it. Similar to the way that Roe v. Wade was eroded over 50 years. Similar to the way that conservatives are currently infiltrating those local governments, those school boards and everything else, that the online space is a place that we need to participate in as many aspects as we can.
Yeah. So my particular brand of sociology looks at how I take into account larger structural systems, and I then look at how individuals interpret those conditions and react to them. Right. And so these kind of resistance strategies, that's stuff we can do at the ground level, but we also need larger structural changes. So, like, for instance, there's a number of countries where if you're a corporation and you make changes or reduce your workforce, you then have to retrain those workers and find them other jobs. Right. And so like those are the kind of radical strategies that I would like to see moving ahead, as things like if you reduce your workforce because of automation, you know, you're a corporation, you're in this society, you have an obligation to those people who you made a promise to that you were going to provide money to as workers. to and to the society, because those workers are probably going to be consuming your product at some point, especially if you're a huge corporation.
Right.
So like if you're going to exist in our country and in our society, well, you need to be a productive member of society, and then we need to figure out what that looks like.
It's one of the things that I mentioned before is how I feel that this industrial revolution is different because the pressures aren't just on the working class, but like you said, if these people can't afford to buy your product, then that's going to be a problem for everyone, you know? Would you agree with that statement or?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're seeing it, I guess on what you would call part of this sounds weird and I fucking hate it, the professional managerial class, right? um, I will argue I'm on the low end of that totem pole, so please, save your rotten tomatoes. But, you ask anybody right now, I don't complain too much about this, but if you ask, people in upper management this question of like, has your living conditions declined? And they'll tell you absolutely yes, that they're having trouble making ends meet. It's only the people who are like really at the top of that hierarchy that are seem to be doing okay. It's because we are squeezing everyone at every level to do more, work harder, be more productive. And honestly, I gotta say, for what?
Mm-hmm.
Like, the more you squeeze us, the lower the quality of the product. Part of the reason academia sucks right now is because everybody is being asked to do more. And so the knowledge that we're producing and putting out there isn't as great as some might think.
Right.
Because again, we're in an assembly line as much as anybody else. It's just our assembly line is knowledge production.
Mm-hmm. And it's a publish or die kind of ecosystem, which doesn't sound like it's conducive to actually quality work, right?
I would say so. Like, I can't tell you the number of people that I've met who said, "Oh yeah, I got a journal article in the ASR, the Annual Review of Sociology. It's like the top journal in my field."
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, I just wrote that article because it was actually published, 5 years ago in this other journal, right? And it's like, dude, well, what the fuck? You already wrote it. Move on to the next thing, right? And that's kind of what's hurt my career. Is in higher education, you can do one of two things. You can either be more of this kind of generalist who's interested in all kinds of different things, or you can be somebody who wants to know a lot about one particular topic and drill down on it, often unnecessarily so, and they never actually move on from like what they begin their career studying. And to me, that sounds fucking boring as hell.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're being honest, like we study society. So shouldn't we be keeping up with changes happening in society?
Mm-hmm.
So to bring this back to AI, like, yeah, everybody studying anything in sociology ought to be incorporating what social media is doing to their participants' views of themselves and the world, and and giving some thought to what AI looks like. Because, like, let's face it, we're increasingly moving to a direction where we're all kind of participating some way online.
Mm-hmm. The aspect of the the generalist versus someone who drills down, it's something I've seen is where not attacking the artist, but people are defending their own little patch of capitalism, right? And in defending it to such a degree that, like, this is a thing, but whatever you're studying, that's not a thing. where like we really, I personally see a tremendous amount of value in like a way to cross multiple disciplines to get the different data points, like a sociology driven economic model, right, to challenge the existing economic models, and how like getting the history and the anthropology in there with the sociology to like be able to get the data on the way the broad trends of how people work. Basically, I'm looking for Asimov's psychohistory. You know what I mean?
Um,
Do you know that one?
no,
All right, I'm old.
sing me a few bars and I'll come in.
It's psychohistory. There's a TV show, so if you don't want to read a book, but Asimov in the Foundation series, it's also called Foundation on TV. There was this one guy, Harry Seldon, who developed this theory that like eventually was able to predict the future based on like studying all of the history, like economics and sociology and all the things. It is Maddie, but it was the 1950s when it was written. And I just feel like something like that, not necessarily to be deterministic, but to act as a guidepost, especially for people of the leftist, aesthetic who want data driven and study driven concepts, that confining them to, we're only going to talk about economics here without doing all the additional things that are around economics, and that something is lost because of that.
I see what you're saying. So, there's actually, this is going to sound really weird. This is going to prove to you how much of a nerd I am. I think there's an episode of the Justice League where there's a computer that like tries to assimilate all the knowledge in history.
Oh, Brainiac.
And then with the intent on destroying like the universe once it completes. And I mean, in many ways, that's kind of like where we're at with academia, right? Is, I know it's Brainiac, Maddie, but there's another one. I can't remember who it is, but anyway, the point I'm trying to make is, that is kind of what happens. You do see a lot of these older academics, once they get to the pinnacle of their career, where they're real assholes to people who have new ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Or, and this just happened. I just probably shouldn't say this because, you never know who's watching, but I just reviewed a book and they made a lot of missteps in that book. It's an older scholar who's well published. And I was like, dude, you're wrong. Like one of the, this will really give it away, but fuck it, I don't care. They made a reference to J.K. Rowling in the book in the same sentence as they're referencing LGBTQ issues. And I was like, dude.
Right.
Like, okay, if you like Harry Potter, fine. Okay, keep it to yourself, especially right now, because at best, people are going to say, oh, right. At worst, they're going to call you a transphobe.
Right.
Like, and it just it underscores my point of a lot of academics are just totally out of touch, right?
Mm-hmm.
They live up to that ivory tower critique. And yeah, unfortunately for him, but fortunately enough, I don't think the book's getting published because there were a number of people who reviewed it, and I'm told, not supposed to know, but I'm told that other reviewers had some issues.
Mm-hmm.
So
it being so divorced from what the kids today call the current meta, will lead you to make those kind of mistakes. And like, I could be imagining this, but I believe that I read about like not a form of governance, but a form of governance wherein you had the old people and the young people, and they like work together to do the things because of you got the wisdom, but you've got also like into the current meta kind of thing. And I feel like a bunch of that is missing everywhere. Like it's just all fucked because of that this alleged divide that we exacerbate with things like, oh, this generation, like boomers versus zoomers. None of that actually exists until you put it out in the media and then get it back, and now it's a thing, right?
Yeah, I don't know. There's kind of a lot of different spots I could riff off that, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the reasons why I'm an avid Twitch viewer is it does in many ways keep me hooked into shit that I might not otherwise know about.
Mm-hmm.
And a, there's been a couple moments here in the last year or two where I've thrown something out there and I'll see the kids look at each other like, how the fuck does he know about this? And then they find out that I like am on Twitch a lot more than I'd like to admit to them. But yeah, it's one of the good things that's come out of me finding out about Twitch. And also Alina OXO, like you're absolutely right. The pace at which things are moving is so quick, and a lot of us younger scholars joke that it's moving so quick we can't keep up in academia, right? And yeah, it's problematic.
Right. Do you see that as a problem that time and patience will solve as these people are no longer able to participate in academia? Or is academia heading in a direction wherein they like where it's just going to be broken to the point where it can't be corrected?
Ooh. So I'm really worried about the state of higher ed, if I'm being real honest with you, because you have a two-pronged attack going on. Really three-pronged, right? If you have like administration and legislators and whatnot who are putting the clamps on people in big ways.
Mm-hmm.
But then we get it from our students. So like one of the most frustrating things is for at least the first 2 to 3 weeks, sometimes longer, just depends. I have to convince them, the youths, as I like to say, that I'm one of the good ones, right?
Right.
I'm and even then I don't know that they fully believe what I'm telling them because I'm the asshole who has to give them the grade at the end.
Right. No, I feel that being 50 years old on Twitch, I feel that vibe.
Yeah, so it's kind of wild, but I get why they're like that, right? Because for every one of me, there's like 5 assholes, and I'm at a conservative university where there are some people with some antiquated ideas or who do hold their students to the fire or who won't consider other things. It kind of sucks, man. And like the other thing that we're finding is we just graduated. Most every state just graduated their largest high school class that they'll ever graduate.
Okay.
So that means we are going to see a reduction in people attending college until there's another boom, right? So like if people start fucking now and we suddenly get a baby boom in 18 years, we'll finally get a larger population. And so because universities are ran like businesses with a balance sheet, administrators are looking at this going, well, maybe we don't want to hire new faculty. And that's a little scary because the other thing is, like, there's a lot of, like, we just lost a colleague in my department, and on one hand, I kind of understand why things went down the way they did, but on the other, I recognize that this was a right-wing conservative attack on this woman, taken out of context or proportion, and nobody really sought to resolve the situation.
Mhm.
They just wanted her job, and so they got it. And I don't know that we'll ever be able to replace her position.
Mhm.
Oh, Maddie
Yeah,
Holmes just brought something up. Oh, this was another thing that, again, bringing it back to AI.
right.
So she's talking about AI professor chatbots. I don't think we're there yet, but one of the things that is happening. So I teach 4 classes. Actually, I just taught 6 last semester. I'm kind of teaching 5 next semester, but one of the things that has happened is a lot of people, in order to get their course load somewhat manageable, is more of us are teaching online. And there's always been this concern that some university administrator is going to go, we want your content, we own your class, we don't need you anymore. We're going to have grad students come in as graders, run the course, and we'll see you later. And I've actually seen that happen. So that's
Mhm.
not like a theoretical. Like, we have classes in my department that are packaged, and you're taking the class really from a grad student who's just grading your assignments.
Mhm. Um, are there potential positive aspects that we could use that are related to that kind of model, like where I can already see the potential for abuse, so I know that I'm aware of it. But like if we did a Patreon for teachers, like where you could learn these courses and pay the teacher directly, but they would actually have the certifications and the diplomas, that you're learning about. Like, because there's a lot of online stuff that's available already from universities. You just don't get you're basically auditing the class. Is there a potential for the more freelance teacher coming up? And would that be a good or bad thing?
Though I don't know if this is true, but someone told me a story once that is actually how professors used to be paid. Um, I think I looked it up once and I couldn't find it.
Mhm.
I don't know if that's true or not, but God, I don't know. Like, because here's what's happening right now is my job performance is evaluated on a number of things, but one of them, and probably the most significant, is what I call the customer satisfaction survey
Right.
at the end of the semester. And course evaluations are great in theory, but what tends to happen is if I'm getting a bad grade, I tend to mark the professor down, right? Like that, and so, like, the A students give me great evals.
Mhm.
The F students don't. And what that has done, until a lot of people earn tenure, which I will never earn because I'm not on the tenure clock where I'm at.
Right.
They teach to the audience and they teach to make the students happy.
Right.
They don't always teach in ways that might help them long term.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a problem because I have seen people graduate who are functionally illiterate.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they can just scrape by, And I've had a number of students who are like seniors and they take my class and then I get their work and I'm like, this dude can't write. And I'm of two minds on it. Usually if it's really bad, I work with that student one-on-one and it drains me of all my energy and I have less patience for that. But like that, it sucks that they like got through a whole fucking college experience and they get to the end and they don't know how to like look up a journal article or they don't like know how to distinguish between a fucking blog post that somebody put together and an actual peer-reviewed journal article. Like that is just fucking negligence on the part of the university. I'm sorry. And also like if I fail that kid, you realize how much pressure is going to be put on me to like change that kid's grade.
Right.
Like it really is maddening and sick.
Yeah, you'd be telling everyone else before you that they were wrong, and that will be problematic for you, not for the people who were in fact wrong.
Well, and not only that, but like, because I was this student, right? So these kids have a special place in my heart. I managed to get through a undergrad and a master's doing minimal writing. Right? Because I knew I was a shitty writer.
Right.
And then I went to my PhD program and they were like, hey, this isn't going to fly here. And luckily I met somebody who was very similar in terms of life experience who really helped me out. Otherwise, I don't know what the fuck I'd be doing. But, and again, it's a product of the system. Like a lot of the reason college professors don't assign like essays is because we don't want to have to grade the damn thing. Like, and I've also seen the other extreme, which is also really scary. So I taught at a private liberal arts college. So again, they're a more affluent group of people attending, primarily upper class kids. There were some working class kids, and usually those students were there on grant aid or support. But the kind of experience is vastly different. At that school, everybody has you write a 10 to 20 page essay, and the kids are well prepared and went to private school. I mean, the gulf between these two camps could not be further apart. And it's really, and so I guess, again, bring it back to AI, you're going to see, I think, public schools adopt more AI or implement these things as cost savings measures. But these private liberal arts schools, they really will be the last place where you can get a good quality education. But again, you'll have to pay for it.
Right.
Maddie has something in the chat about tapping into online classes. I do that. A lot of us do it. In the old days, you just email a professor, hey, I know you teach this class. Could you send me your syllabus? I'm going to be teaching this in the fall. And you kind of cobble together different ideas, much like writing a paper, right? You take ideas that you like and you put them together, and then that's your text. And so I do this a lot. I see what other professors are doing, and try to do that.
Much like the way that Midjourney makes its art with grabbing a bunch of stuff. The argument between influences of people and influences of AI art is one of my favorites because we're still looking for that indeterminate human factor. I've had you here for let's say an hour and 15 because of getting the technical issues worked out. So I would love the opportunity to speak with you again in the future. But is there anything that you feel that you wanted to cover that we haven't covered today?
Yeah, I mean, I got the main things that I've been thinking about out of the way, about like top down produced culture versus, authentically produced art, and kind of how that looks like, and how it relates to my work. We talked a little bit about higher education, how these things are changing. I don't know. I asked the same of you. Is there anything you wanted to get into that we didn't? I got, I've got time, so.
Um, unfortunately, I don't. But I know that whatever I thought of earlier that completely broke my brain for those 5 minutes, it was a good question. I'm sure I'll think of it in the future, and I'll ask you on Twitter because you're there.
Oh, actually,
Yes,
there is a number of things that I could kind of
let's go.
illustrate more about AI. Um, just in a couple in a few minutes, but
Yeah.
so I've edited a number of journals. So what that means is I'm the guy who's in charge of finding authors, getting papers, sending them out for review, um, working with the authors to fix that. And so in science, it's a pretty prestigious thing. Like it's up there because
Hmm.
and I would argue you have more power as a journal editor than anybody else in science,
Hmm.
because you can kill a paper or you can make a paper publish,
Right.
depending on how you act or don't act on it. But one of the things that the algorithm does now with a lot of top journals is it automatically recommends to you people to use as reviewers. And it's based off if they've published in the same area, which is usually determined by keywords
Hmm.
in their work. But I have just like, I don't use that system when I'm doing that because um, the people who generally the algorithm recommends are some of the worst people to review articles. Like,
Hmm.
of the mindset in science, we are a collective of people striving to produce accurate and true knowledge, or the most accurate or most true knowledge that we can at that time.
Hmm.
And so it's the responsibility, I think, of reviewers of journals and also publishers to give an author a path forward. So if they submit to you a shitty article, right? Um, yeah, you can rip it to shreds, or you can rip it to shreds and then give them a path forward. And so in that way, I see I've seen a lot. I've seen a couple papers that I've been a reviewer on, and the journal editor has squashed it for one reason or another. But all this is to say is, like, AI is having a very subtle and interesting impact that I don't think people have really um, appreciated in science. And that's scary because, like, the computer, again, these algorithms depend on what we tell them is a priority. And so if we tell them it's engagement and clicks is the priority, even in science, that's going to be who your dominant voices are, but they ain't necessarily going to be the best voices.
Right. Like, I mean, what would be the fix for that? Like, everything with an algorithm trends towards engagement, and the person who uses the words that you are, especially if you're like Jordan Peterson, I'm sure uses a bunch of words that aren't like, like wokeness and those, but actual like good words. And he would definitely, the algorithm tilts for him because of his volume of work, right? Whether online or, in book form, and the number of people who talk about him. Is there a solution for that doesn't rely on no, you can't do that anymore because people are going to trend towards automation.
So with Jordan Peterson and those intellectual dark web types, what's fascinating is they haven't had the best careers in science. In fact, like Brett Weinstein has like one journal article, I think. But they have publications in popular presses, which is a whole other racket that I'm not in. One of the things that's most people probably don't know is most academics never see a dime from anything they write, at least directly. Like, I have a job, I get paid, and actually my job, it doesn't matter if I publish or not. If I want to move from here, though, I need to publish, which I'm publishing. And also, I've grown to like the work because I've been in a really weird, precarious position. And so I had to write, and then I got into it and was like, oh, okay, yeah, this is not so bad. But a solution to this kind of populist approach to doing science, I don't know. I've been thinking a lot about that, and I don't know what the solution is. Like, someone suggested that we move to a non-blind peer review. So right now, most journals ask, like, they take off the names of the authors. So you get a paper, you typically have no idea who's writing it. And what that has resulted in is the same phenomenon you see on 4chan, right? Where I'm anonymous, so I can say whatever the fuck I want. And I've seen some academics say some really nasty stuff to authors. So the other extreme is, okay, we identify who the authors are, and that way, you know, if you're a dick, then people are going to know. I don't necessarily think that approach is the best either, because then what happens is everybody's nice to each other. And like, the best scholarly debates have been the nastiest scholarly debates that I've seen. And you know, and some of them were in person at conferences, others were you know, between authors, going back and forth over a particular issue. But I think if we open it up like that, it may end up having the same effect. And so I don't really know. I don't have a I mean, I can tell you what, like if you're watching or listening to this, if you're a student and there's a professor who, like, you take a class with, or if there's somebody that produces work that you're enjoying, like, take a second, send an email out to that person, CC their department chair or even the dean of their school, tell them how great they are and why. Like, that could have some real tangible impact, because all those people get most of the time are, I hate you, I hope you die. Like,
Right.
you gave me a bad grade. I mean, you know, those kind of I call it fan mail. Like, that can have a positive impact. And you know, and also like, if you know somebody who is in the publishing realm, maybe you don't have enough money to buy their work, but you know, you do have an internet browser, so, like, you know, check out what they're doing. Like, that's one way you can help. You know, beyond that, it's going to take some real changes within the system. And I don't know, on that note, like, we're seeing, like, I'm starting to see this kind of conservative universities versus liberal universities. So, like, colleges in red states, for example, programs like sociology are in decline, but in blue states they're on the rise. And so I'm starting to see some of this other stuff in ways that I would have never thought I would see.
Do you see, is your field subjected to the reproducibility crisis? Like, is that something that has affected your field?
Fuck, I'm having brain fog.
I
The
mean,
reproducibility, that's just like people fabricating data, right?
yeah, like where the data, like they do the thing and they come up with something, and whenever anybody tries to do anything with it, they come up with different answers, and they can't reproduce that. It's usually like experimental things, but I feel like there might be an aspect of that in especially more the quantitative aspects of sociology, where they're just using bad data and coming up with poor solutions? Or is that just inherent in the system? Do you inevitably get the Jordan Peterson and that's a feature?
God, I hope not. So my work's primarily qualitative, and this is always a problem with qualitative methods. Is I can do a study on a topic, you can do a study on a topic, and come up with completely different ways of understanding or interpreting that data,
Mm-hmm.
and that's actually cool,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because what that like knowledge is multifaceted, right? It's not like a mirror, it's more like a prism.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what makes it so interesting, to me at least. Now there is a reproducibility crisis I've heard of that Homozygote talks a lot about, and that's where scientists are fabricating data,
Right.
and using images that are photoshopped. And I think it's more in the hard sciences than it is in sociology. But I do know there's a couple papers published in a top tier journal. It's Socius, SOCIUS, and they tend to publish more. Like someone told me to put my QAnon paper in there because it would be more widely read.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at it, was like, no, I'm good. I'm glad I didn't, because the next week there was like a scandal where someone looked at the data that this article was based on and found out that their conclusions were all fucked up.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to think that there's less of that goes on, but like, Charles Murray is another example, right? Unfortunately, he came out of sociology, and he's one of the most racist scientists out there. He wrote the bell curve,
Mm-hmm.
and his data may have been factual, but the way he interpreted that data was all fucked up.
Right.
And that's the human element that is why I think AI will never be able to really solve, or never really replace us, because we are there's much more complexity to the human world. All AI or all a computer system can do is to tell you, given these particular variables and these parameters, this is the most likely outcome.
Mm-hmm.
And so the real innovation is going to be human.
Is it possible, though, that, I mean, not to diminish you at all, but you're just a basic human form. You have linear time and only so much time in the day in which to intake data and analyze it against other data. Is it possible that the AI having access to the sum total of the data could, in fact, reach better conclusions than you could as a linear human being?
Yes. So this is the problem that we're having right now in there. So there's right now it's actually kind of a good time to be in sociology. It's kind of a great time to be a social scientist if you choose to go a particular route. We are in high demand in government and in outside academia. So like I had a second round interview at Facebook, which is pretty good. Like most people, like had I made it to the third round, I think I might have been invited out there or whatever. Ultimately, I'm glad I didn't get that job. It was while I was kind of in between positions, and so I was, kind of desperate. But the crisis within those organizations is they have massive amounts of data, and there's even in sociology is called computational sociology, where they're making use of big data to draw conclusions. Like we know that particular things correlate, like what kind of shoes you buy, right? Thanks to Amazon. And then if we have some public data, like on health or on who's a criminal, like we can correlate that data and show that, yeah, if you buy a particular brand of shoes, you're twice as likely to be a criminal. But we can't tell you why that's necessarily the case. We just have these kind of, I don't want to call them meaningless because there may be some meaning there that we just can't see, but we have all this data. We know it correlates, but like, why? Right. And that's the interesting part that I don't think AI can do. And it's also why we can't. Right. And so there's this crisis in big data and computational sociology and across the field where they need people who understand how data works and have different perspectives to basically come in and help them make sense of all this data.
Mm-hmm. And like as a tool, like, and again, my nature would not want like individual sociologists analyzing all the data and like that authority aspect of it, which, corrupts, as we've talked about in academia and whatnot. But like, where you would have a team, a group who would look at the data, interpret what the AI is telling them, give it back to the AI, maybe run it a few different times, like where they can exist kind of symbiotically, you know what I mean? Do you think that because again, like you said, like the whole Cambridge Analytica thing, they were looking for very precise outcomes when they did their Brexit and when they, with the Trump election, when you're looking beyond that, there is a tremendous amount of data that tells us things about ourselves that we are not aware of because we don't have access to it, that we can't analyze. Like I couldn't look at all my data and make any sense out of it, but like AI could, and then present me with a picture,
So at Facebook, that's how that works actually. So you're so if I would have gotten that position, I would have been embedded within a product team, and there'd be like an engineer and somebody in charge of the marketing and like, maybe 6 or 7 people. And my job would have been to run basically the human trials. Like we want to increase user interaction on whatever YouTube shorts, like to increase the amount of people watching YouTube shorts. What do we need to change about our app in order to increase that engagement? And so there is kind of some of that going on, but I could totally see, in fact, for decades, there's been this talk about interdisciplinary research and the need for more interdisciplinary research, because the idea is if you get a bunch of people from different fields working on the same project, they're all going to see something different.
Right.
In theory, that's a phenomenal idea, but in practice, it rarely works out that way. And having had a number of co-authors on papers, that's really hard to do. And I think it's because, at least within my field, we often study things that we're passionate about because we can study anything we want to.
Mhm.
And as a result, you get people who are like if I invite people onto a project I'm working on, they don't come to it with the same energy I do.
Right.
And so I don't really know how to make that work in terms of that. However, in the hard sciences, they do that all the time. And, there's like 20 people on a particular paper. And so it's kind of maddening.
Mm-hmm. Like as I was talking about earlier with like that, the sociologically driven economic view and all those kind of things. and I feel like that again, you would need the proper people in order to make it happen, and people, for all their advantages, are also some of the disadvantages, unfortunately. But with enough of the proper people in all these interdisciplines, that you can get a better map to understand like both where we've come, where we're going, and how all these things interrelate. But maybe nobody wants that, right? Like part of the human condition is to feel like we know stuff. So when you feel like you know stuff, you feel more confident, you feel better. The people who are watching Fox News and getting rage focused and everything else feel, for a given value of the word good about, they feel confident and knowledgeable and all those kind of things. I guess the real question is, like, because you understand social media somewhat, can you have social media? Can you have Twitter without advertising? Or does the nature of its focus to drive sales create the thing that it is?
Oh, I see. I mean, the easy argument for me to take on this is say, yeah, it's capitalism. You can't have anything without, if it's not serving the business of business, then you can't have it. And so then if that is true, then the solution is to nationalize it, right? To take it over. Like, and again, I think that there's actually a whole literature that has predicted this. David Putnam is the guy who really started, he made a huge splash with a book called Bowling Alone.
Mm-hmm.
And so here's an interesting correlation that I don't know that a computer would have picked up on, but he did. So if you look at the data for the number of bowling leagues in the United States, it's gone steadily down since the 70s, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
You really choose almost any point in history and it's gone down. And so what he uses that as an analogy for what is happening to the United States. He says that we're becoming more individualistic. That's caused, like, the fact that bowling leagues are in decline shows us that people are more unwilling to work together. Oh, the other important piece is the number of bowlers has increased, right?
Mm-hmm.
So bowling leagues down, bowlers up.
Right.
And so what he says is that this is a clear sign we're becoming more individualistic. People aren't participating in society. Therefore, you're going to have all these problems.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's kind of what's happening right now is we're becoming like so individualistic, right? We're being driven kind of towards that way. But bowling alleys feel like a non-random thing. So it is kind of a non-random thing, and I have no idea why he chose that. I mean, I'm sure it's somewhere. The book is literally this thick. It's a pretty hefty read, but anyway, if I could do, let's go bowling together, holding hands, maybe kissing. Yeah, fuck, I forgot where I was going with that. God damn it,
Fucking Alita.
Yeah. Oh, right. So even in academia, we're becoming more individualistic. The incentive structure is such that it's less conducive to working together on on teams, especially in social sciences. Like these hard science guys, I can see like they actually have an incentive because of the way grants are structured and just kind of how their fields have developed over time. Like the incentive structure is such that you want teams of people working on a project.
Mhm.
And so we need something like that really in the humanities and social sciences where it's a bunch of people coming together to work on a project. And I've seen it a couple times. Like I'd love to find somebody who's great at writing grants. They bring in the money, I'll write the papers, and we'll call it a day.
Mhm.
But yeah, those kinds of relationships are few and far between, I'm afraid.
Yeah, there is I mean, it's the weird reciprocal nature of how we get into these things is like where the situation becomes more individualistic, and then the outcome is to create the response whereby we become more individualistic, right? It's like I don't want to team with Professor Q because I need to worry about my own little chunk of capitalism here and defend it from anyone else whose ideas differ from mine, because you might pop off and write a paper on how this is actually something that's heretical, and now I'm associated with you, and now we're both done.
I'm trying to think if that happened to me. I think it kind of did happen to me in a weird way. I'm not going to tell that story, but
Okay.
there's one that kind of happened to me once with somebody. I remember why I brought Robert Putnam up about nationalizing Twitter. So we often talk about how Twitter's the public square.
Right.
Like if that's true, like if we've maybe we ought to really give some thought to nationalizing it. Like if it really is where people are meeting and interacting and forming relationships, like yeah, and like we've seen malls go down. Like that used to be the center for teenage interaction. Now those are kind of gone. No, not nationalized bowling leagues, damn it. But like in sociology, there's these places we have. There's public spaces, private spaces, and third spaces, right? So public spaces are parks, and they're free, and they're places to go to. Private spaces, that's your home, and then there's these third spaces, which are a little bit of both, right? And the argument put forth by people working with those terms is that these kind of public spaces and third spaces have been in decline. Like originally, it used to be that they were recognizing public spaces were on the decline, and so they were writing about third spaces as this way to fill the void. So those are your like shopping malls that you can go in, you can hang out at the food court. And that's like where a lot of dialogue happens. Another example of this would be like the local diner in a small town where all the truckers get together, and have breakfast or whatever. But now Twitter is that space, right? So like maybe there is something to nationalizing it in order to kind of bring together social cohesion and And if you did like a nationalization of it, you could implement all kinds of policies that could be informed by scientific data, you know, and people would have a say so.
Mm-hmm.
Governor Laura Kelly just banned TikTok on state issues. So, oh, I've heard about this, about the TikTok ban. I can't tell if that's a legitimate concern or if that's just right-wing culture and culture war shit. Because there is some interesting data out there, unfortunately, that suggests that, yeah, maybe what governments own particular social media platforms
Mm-hmm.
is an issue. And I'm most familiar with this with Grindr. So Grindr is the gay dating app that people use, and it was owned by a Beijing tech corporation, and the United States said, you need to sell this. Like we can't have this. And so I got sold to some other company. I kind of lost track of how things went down with that. But the point was there was a security concern. And I think there was even a proposed legislation about banning Grindr on government devices. And there were some people working on like kind of unpacking that a little bit, but I don't think their work really went anywhere. But it's funny to me to think that somewhere someone actually has Lindsey Graham's nude photos from his Grindr profile, just as kind of like a meme.
Yeah. I mean, if we're going to be real about it, there should be no data gathering apps on your government phone to begin with. If you need to have TikTok, then go get a different phone. You know, like I'm of that mind. It's like should not be a TikTok issue. If we're talking about data, then we should be talking about all the data, right? But we're not talking about all the data. We're only talking about the data that belongs to the foreign entities, and they're probably not sharing with us, right? With the U.S., us. So I don't see an issue with that. If my kid gets a computer from school, he can't put certain apps on it because it's for school, that kind of thing. So,
well, I think it underscores like just how much tech has entered into our lives, that and how much these companies use that data and sell that data, and you know, all of the things that we talk about, right? Like, do you want someone who is a policymaker, like, you know, they probably have stuff that they probably know stuff that puts them at serious risk if it gets out there.
sure,
So
absolutely.
So yeah, I'm down with that.
There's a question of intent around the data, right? Is the data the issue, or is it the intent of what people want to do with the data, right? Like,
well, and more specifically, like I can tell you, because I did work in government for a little while, what they're really concerned about is not necessarily that some government agency is going to suddenly get your nude photos and blackmail you with it. I mean, that definitely is a concern, right? But what they're more concerned about is that you install some software on your phone, some app that then harvests data and mines data from your phone that then infects machines throughout their network. That's really what they're concerned about. Because there's been a number of cases where someone plugged in a USB device and suddenly, 100 machines owned by Department of Defense are infected with some kind of malware.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and that's when we're talking security concerns, that's going to be expected. But I'm looking at data in general is like if I have to live under capitalism, I want the best targeted ads in the world, right? Like, because I want to know about the things that I would like to know about. My issue with targeted ads is they just function on high end demographics and not, precise to interpreting that data properly. But is there, like, if we were to say, like, pass a law where, because we're not going to pass a law that says that they can't sell the data, but if they passed a law that had to tell us everything that they did with our data and any of that, then would people actually do anything with that? Like, would people opt out of using Twitter to protect their data?
Right. Man, it's an issue of convenience, right? Like, how quickly do you want to log into your Instacart account that's tied to your Gmail? That's, and yeah, I don't know what the answer is. I know that we're quickly moving to a point where we're going to have to like legislate this stuff because it's literally ripping our society apart.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's allowed the spread of harmful misinformation. It's given birth to QAnon in many respects, like, is kind of somewhat AI produced, right? Like it tapped into the information ecosystem, and there were a number of bots amplifying it. Like that part we know is true, because there were a number of people who had access to a program called Power9 that then basically tricked the algorithm on Twitter to amplify specific QAnon posts.
Mm-hmm. And that is going to inevitably lead to, like, I mean, are we going to see a Q2? Like, or is Q just going to continue to evolve into the next form?
So, you may be asking me something. I suspect you already kind of know the answer to this. So recently, Ron and Jim Watkins, well, we're not sure that it's them, but someone started posting again as Q on a website owned by them.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this goes back to our original point of conversation about authenticity and the need for this kind of creative spark. They tried to post as Q, and the audience rejected it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and I think it was because, like, earlier they just kind of stumbled onto this thing. Like, I think it really happened by a fluke and without a real purpose behind it. But then over time, I think it developed a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and that's kind of how the kind of culture industry works, is it finds authentically produced art, and then it colonizes it, and then it directs it towards a particular aim or purpose. And I think that's a lot of the issue. Like, so I don't think there'll be a Q2, but I think we will be stuck with QAnon for a really long time.
So it's already up there with, like, many of the other classic because if I recall correctly, Q is capable and Q-ists are capable of adapting any of the older conspiracy theories into the Q mythology, right?
So,
or am I getting that wrong?
I don't have it. It must be on my it's in my office, but there's a thing called the Q map.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll try to, let me see if I can find it real quick. But it was produced by one of the major.
Is this the
Well,
one that has like Bigfoot on it?
yeah, it 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 basically charts out every conspiracy theory, and here it is. Here it is. Here it is. Oh wait, that's the wrong one. That was something else I was looking up. There you go. And so yeah, like Bigfoot's on there, but like you can see at the top, it's got the Vatican, COINTELPRO, CIA, MK Ultra, and then QAnon. Trying to figure out this. Actually, this is a different map. But you can see the Q folks are using it. And in the map that I have, Q is in the bottom right. This seems to have taken it out. So this actually could be an early version, because there is actually an older version of this map that's like somewhere from the 1960s I found in a book. But yeah, all it did was, they just followed the Republican tactic of being a big tent, right? So like QAnon describes itself as a big tent conspiracy theory, meaning they don't care if you believe that the earth is flat. In fact, there were even people who went to flat earth conventions to recruit people to QAnon because they realized, oh, if you believe the earth is flat, well, let me show you this, right? And so yeah, there's it does suck everything into it, because all it is this belief that that you are not in control of the situation in which you find yourself, that you are the pawn in a much larger game being played by elites, which is kind of true to some degree, right? Like, if we think about political agency here in the United States, we are very limited in how we can interface with our governments. There's a lot of things that QAnon gets right. It's just they prescribe what's happening to aliens or to, some other group. And then you peel back the layers just a little bit and you find out, oh, they're actually talking about the Jews.
Right.
No thanks. I'm out.
Yeah, no, and that is inherent in the entirety of, the right-wing conservative, especially the the rage engagement sphere, is how they define the problems just fine, but their prescriptions are always like to blame someone else as opposed to fixing the problem.
Yeah, no arguments here. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. In fact, speaking of AI, I did get on Chat GPT and asked it. I was just like, I want to see what it gives me back. It's like, is QAnon real? And it responded by saying, well, I like to keep an open mind. And I about shit myself because I was like, oh my God, the fucking thing isn't really even out yet. And it's already like open, like, holy shit, man.
Right.
Like, this is bad. This is bad.
And this is part of the issue is is setting the guardrails with the AI is like you want it to be fact based and everything else, but then now you're starting to intrude on people's religious aspects or things of that nature, and there's a blend that humans can interpret where the AI is incapable of doing that. So you just have all these things that are controversial put into that same box to have an open mind about. And where do you put the guardrails there? Like, because again, the humans are both the thing and the problem. Is like, if you put the guardrails on stuff that you can determine using science, then there will be religious people who get angry, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all this stuff. It it depends on what, and again, this is like a major part of my research, or the arguments that I'm making within my research is that like culture in and of itself is not. It doesn't really necessarily have a political agenda,
Mm-hmm.
right? But culture is often put in service to other things, right? And so it's up to us as human beings to figure out how we want to direct that, how we want to direct AI, how we want to direct social media. And I think it's only through, regulating those as public utilities that we're even going to have a limited say so in what those purposes are. Because right now, it's just make money, drive it, and really, at the end of the day, really, it's all about making money.
Mm-hmm.
So,
but is there a concern, like, I don't do slippery slopes, and I don't like the idea that such and such technology will be used or such and such legislation will be used against leftists. Well, everything is already used against leftists, so that shouldn't be an argument to be made. But like the way that China, however you feel about China, interacts with their social media and everything else is indicative of how a government could choose to act, where it is also almost as arbitrary as the corporation, right? Like that the corporation is driven by money, where the government could be driven by like daddy wants quiet kind of suppression mentality.
I like that. I mean, with anything, like, I had a really amazing experience. I got to go travel the world, and it really opened my eyes to this basic idea, and that's that, like, it was kind of like I was moving through all these places that were very similar. So like every 2 weeks I was in a new place.
Mm-hmm.
And like, and this was over 3 months. So it was like a pretty long time. And, I was traveling alone too. And so you start to like look for points of reference that you're like, okay, this is the local corner store. All right. This is like, this equals this in this country, right? And so it gave me this real appreciation for like moving through, or seeing myself as moving through kind of different kind of alternate realities, or at least the close that I could possibly come to in my lifetime. And the way China sets things up is the way China sets things up. We don't have to follow their model. We could choose another way. And in fact, the best policies based on the data are generally some kind of mixture between the kind of extreme authoritarianism model, or collectivist model, rather. I'm sorry, I didn't mean authoritarian. The collectivist model versus capitalist model. So usually the best points are incorporate elements of both. And so, like, again, the issue is we're not even having a discussion at the federal level or at the individual state level of what do we want to do about social media? What do we want to do about the internet as a utility?
do you see it? Excuse me. Actually, getting to the point where anyone, because I feel like it's almost a no-win politically, whatever angle you come at it from with social media. Like the left will say they are going to silence leftist voices. The right will say they are going to silence right-wing voices. Everyone will, we're already at that point where those are the arguments being made. Is it possible for any political entity to have enough political will to transcend those concerns and actually make that kind of move?
I'm guessing you're referring to the number of studies that have been done that shows that there's more censorship of the left than the right.
Yes. But
Yeah.
but also in the discourse, because the right always tells you that the opposite is true, right? Like your Tim Pools, your Ben Shapiro's, your Crowders, they always talk about how right-wing voices are being censored on the internet.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're, again, I think it's the political will part. You got that for sure. I also think it's like what's possible, right? Because the one thing that I lack that I wish I knew more about was I wish I had like a computer science degree so that I could kind of weigh in more heavily into this. But I'm kind of limited in that respect. I mean, I think we're going to have a real serious conversation about that. And not just about this, but about a lot of other things that we're just have been swept under the rug for so long. And the conversation avoided out of politeness, and now it's gone on long enough. Things are starting to spill over. And so in that regard, I think now is a really optimistic time. And in fact, this is going to sound weird to most people, but when Trump got elected, I was actually pretty happy in a certain sense because I realized that this was going to push conversations to the surface,
right?
That it was potentially going to activate people. Now, yes, I think the suffering people experienced under his regime awful, and I wish that hadn't happened. But at the same point in time, I realized that this presented a particular opportunity that, and I wish that the elected officials would have gone farther than Joe Biden as their compromise to try. Like there's so many other things that could have happened that weren't seized upon. But again, I think it goes back to the left articulating what their vision looks like. I think honestly, people like you producing content and putting that out there is important because I don't know if you've been to the bookstore lately, but I just went to Barnes and Noble and I about had a heart attack. They had in the social sciences section, David Icke's book, the guy who believes that, all the ruling elite are lizard people. In English, he's the British Alex Jones.
Okay.
He's the best. Yeah. Anti-vax books. So many biographies of right-wing figures.
Mm-hmm.
It saddened me.
Right.
So we need to pump out, I guess my point is we need to pump out more content in order to combat that. Like we need our own pipeline that the right's clearly been working on for decades. So, and we don't really have it.
Hey, got a raid. Hi, Miss Anita Bump. Hi, Raiders. You're probably still trapped in ad hell. One of the things, thank you, Paradigm.
This name keeps coming up over and over again. Every day, Pepe's mail's getting sent back to me. Pepe Sylvia, Pepe Sylvia. I look at the mail. Well, this whole box is Pepe Sylvia.
So to talk about like the I am pretty. The to talk about the like you said about how the mall has been lost to us as our public square for a variety of reasons. The the nature of like for instance Twitch, right? Like and you talk about like I wish I had a computer science degree so that I can do more of that. Is the creation and especially like I'm throwing a whole bunch of qualifiers on this statement before I even make it, but like with the way that Twitch poll has gone and the debate sphere has gone and like we're not interested in that anymore. There's potential for like working groups of people with specific knowledge to do exactly what you said is like what Professor Q needs is he needs a computer science person to bounce some questions off of in the same way that Globus, who doesn't have a degree but has a variety of incidental information in his brain, but can find the people to ask. And like I'm doing my best within this small little section of the world to kind of grab all these different ideas and like get them next to each other. And if we could create groups and systems within these spaces for people to associate from different disciplines to to provide you with the information that you need without you having to go through the entirety of a degree in order to get you know what I mean there.
Yeah. So, um, yes, in an ideal world, I would have access to millions of dollars of grant money and could here's what I really wanted to do, and I almost got it, and I was like, yes. I almost had data from Grinder and Scruff and some others for that. That was back when I was working on that as a like area of study. Um, I got my 3 articles that I wanted out of it. I'm done. I don't want to ever fucking write about Grinder as long as I'm alive, if I can avoid it. But they were going to give me access to their data, and then I think they realized what like I wasn't going to be very sympathetic to them, and that I was going to air a lot of dirty laundry. What I really wanted with the data was I wanted to figure out where the gays were, because that's a question that has really plagued the academic literature for a long time. Like,
Mm-hmm.
where do gay people live? How many of them are in metro areas versus non-metro areas? Just all kinds of questions, but it fell through. Yes, I agree with you, Miss Anita Bump. In an ideal world, nobody would worry about it. True, and based. Um, but yeah, anyway, they wouldn't give me the data. They wanted me, like, I think actually one of those companies wanted me to pay for it, and if I had access to grant money, that would have been no problem. But like, you know, I don't think the NSF is in the business of giving me data, giving me money to go study gay dating patterns. Like, I could just see them like laughing their asses off at that. Like, what the fuck is this guy on about?
Well, like I mean, if you propose a grant properly, where like you were exploring extremist activity, Muslim, you got to put that in there in order to get the NSF on board. But like Muslim extremist activity in the gay community via the data from Grinder and Scruff, you might get that approved.
Man, I thought I was the most conniving person because I've done a lot of conniving shit during my day for like to get one over on the system. My claim to fame is I started a student organization called the Vampire Live Action Role Playing Association,
Mm-hmm.
which was just an excuse for all of the goth kids on campus to have pizza parties all year long. Yeah, that was a fun time. But yeah, you're right. Like, actually, I could see that being a thing where they might fund. You're right. So maybe if I would have just been more innovative, I could have. I think right now the like, so if you're kind of curious, like where my like right now I'm writing on QAnon because I'm fascinated by what social media has done to create belief systems, like alternative belief systems
Mm-hmm.
and echo chambers. And, I'm looking at the same kind of social processes, but in a much more, some might argue, serious way. Like my stuff on Grindr, I think is really important because I was one of the first to go, hey, there's a bunch of racist shit happening on this app. These white gay guys are like, being transphobic, being racist pieces of shit. Now it's evolved to like, how is social media and algorithmic technology fucking up democracy? Like, it's a much broader question, but I think in some ways way more important. Though, interestingly, I do have a project. I got a folder for it on my work machine called Gayanon. And so I am kind of interested, and just my little kind of jump in that pool. There's a not unsignificant number of LGBT folks who got sucked into QAnon.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the nature of QAnon itself is to be pervasive, right? Like, it is the COVID of cults, because whatever your personal biases, it can satisfy them as long as you don't think about it too much.
Right. And that's actually a good way to put it. Like, it's a virus. And like, so I'm reading a lot about the Nazis and their rise to power. And I'm sure it gets me some weird glances when I'm like out there reading in the world, because I tend to work at coffee shops a lot. But one of the things that I've come to realize and appreciate, like, the Nazi Party was not just a political movement, but it was a total enveloping culture. Like, it started out as a political movement, but then it quickly, like the Hitler Youth, that was a back to nature movement, like the Boy Scouts.
Right.
Like, it infiltrated into all kinds of things, including sports. And there were actually, I got a book on my shelf I've been wanting to read, but it's on gays who were in the Nazi Party. And like homosexuality, like the practice of same-sex relationships very much went on within the Nazi Party and amongst soldiers, but they wouldn't call it gay, right? Like, the old meme of, it's not gay unless,
right.
So
do you, like, I mean, with all your, is a joke I make with my wife quite often, with all your spare time, with all your free time, the idea of having access, because when you're studying something like Q, there are all of the sociological aspects of it within the spaces, and you have a handle on like social media and things of that nature. But like, I would have to think that there are definitely aspects, because of certain technological knowledge that you might lack, or certain coding knowledge, or any of those things that could lend some additional insight that you don't have access to. And having some kind of group in which people were volunteering, because what you said earlier is like, your project is only going to get you excited, and other people will show up just to do it for whatever reason. But if it's more like of a voluntary kind of thing, then people would be more invested because they actually care. Like, some coder somewhere who lost his mom to QAnon has an invested interest in this kind of thing. You feel that's accurate?
Yeah. So, yeah, in an ideal world, you would think that that would be really easy to do, but it's actually really hard. So within the extremism world, there actually is a university where that's a thing. So Chapman University has a brilliant sociology and criminology department, and that's like the place if you study right-wing extremism to end up at. Like, I won't say all, but there's a good chunk of professors there who do that kind of work. A guy from my program who wrote one of the first contemporary ethnographies of the alt-right, ethnography meaning he went and actually like lived with the people he was studying and interviewed them and talked to them. And he can do that because he kind of looks the part, even though he's a hardcore leftist. Yeah, you just don't really see that as much. And like, there's actually a QAnon academic group that sprung up. But it's actually, this is kind of interesting. It's mostly graduate students and young, like, I think I'm like I won't say the most seasoned scholar, but I'm definitely like one of the few people who's like got a job and is not still in school in that group.
Yeah, I mean it all comes back to capitalism, right? When you don't work for a living, you theoretically have more free time to be involved in more, things that you might choose to, kind of thing. So if we can just solve capitalism, then maybe we can solve QAnon.
Well, I mean, you actually, I laugh at that, but you're actually right. My whole stick with QAnon has always been, it's these underlying structural conditions, the feelings of what we call in sociology anomie, which is just this feeling that you're not connected to the rest of society or to other human beings in a meaningful kind of way. The lack of political agency, the immense wealth inequality that exists, the distrust of I don't know, everything, right? That led to QAnon. And until you solve that, you will never fully, like, it's going to be a thing. And even then, it's still going to be like the only ideal situation, right, is maybe getting, or like the only foreseeable conclusion I could think of is we get to a point where it becomes more like Bigfoot. Like, it's out there, people believe in it, maybe they go hunting for Bigfoot, but they're not trying to like blow up the Capitol or destroy the government. They're just, and maybe even some of them think they laugh at themselves, like most Bigfoot people do, actually.
Right.
But yeah, like, and again, you have to solve these kind of basic things in order to get to that point. And it's just so fucked up that we got here, but it's not unpredictable. I mean, people have been sounding the alarm bell for at least as long as I've been a student.
Yeah, people have been sounding alarm bells regarding everything, and then everyone acts surprised when we finally get here, Not everyone, obviously, the people sounding the bells and us who listen to them, but,
Yeah, we're like, we told you.
Right. Yeah, they're unfortunately, after the last time I said that I had to wrap this up, you connived me into another hour of conversation.
I didn't mean to, but we were having a good time.
Yeah,
so.
no, we absolutely are. That's you are one of those people that I feel like I could literally have conversation
Who will
with.
stand up for this country? And the answer we're learning is
Hold on.
Americans. Antifa, Black Lives
Chad
Matter.
is writing.
Well, it's up to them.
Oh yeah, I see. Somebody dropped you some biddies.
Yep. Thank you, Cryptid. But yeah, like there are some people on this platform that, like, literally we could just chat shit for the next 6 hours and everyone would have a wonderful time. And that's why I love Twitch so much and why I enjoy doing these interviews. And you are one of those people. This conversation, at least on my end, and I hope on yours, has been wonderful. And it was a pleasure to finally have the opportunity to speak with you.
Yeah, see, I'm not always a shit poster, but when I'm in chat.
You're like two different people.
Aren't we all, though?
And shout out to Levelhead's mom, right?
Yes, shout out to Levelhead's mom.
All right, but I hope to have the opportunity to speak with you
Who will
again in the
stand up for
future.
this country? And the answer we're learning is Americans.
Yeah, I mean, anytime. Like
Black
I
Lives
told
Matter.
Marcus
Yeah,
and
it's
those
up to
guys,
them.
I'm always available as a resource. I don't think I will ever become like a quote unquote career streamer, but mostly because I value my personal life way too much, and also I got a lot of irons in the fire. So,
Right.
it's hard. So.
No, but like you even being the asset that you are, coming on and talking to people, especially like, this 10 viewer Andy, like I think that there's valuable information and you help provide it and we're getting it out there. And I think that this is the way that the ecosystem works, and I look forward to having the opportunity to talk to Marcus about some stuff. I'm supposed to talk with Greg later. So there's a lot of positive things happening in my space regarding this, and I'm having a grand old time.
Cool. And again, I enjoy watching. If for no other reason, like I said, I'm working on a book on Twitch, and so like for me, it's kind of data. It's kind of that's the only benefit from being able to research anything you want is you can turn things you love into areas of research.
Right on. Well, it was a pleasure talking to you, and I look forward to figuring out what we can do again in the future.
Cool, man. See you later. Have a good night.
You too. Take care. Well, I hope you liked that as much as I did. And for you people watching in the VOD, what are you doing with your life? You need to come here. See the live show. See the live show. It's a whole thing. I don't even know. It's like nobody on right now. What is up? Or at least nobody. See, like, you might like some of these people, but I'm just like, I don't know. Like, especially the vibe. Yeah, no. I appreciate, though. I appreciate, it was Cryptid and Nabil. Yeah, Cryptid and Nabil with the biddies. I'm sure if Lenny had been here, then we'd be looking at it. What are you doing? We'd be looking at a hype train. Chaotic good does not mean chaotic nice. Yes, this is true.
Who will stand up for this country?
Oh, here we go.
The answer we're learning is Americans. Antifa, Black Lives Matter. Well, it's up to them.
So, everybody had a good time. I had a good time. Like everybody's doing like video games and stuff. And I don't feel like George Soros did fund Antifa. Like these are good video game people, but they're like, I think this will work. He seems like a good person, or they. I don't want to assume. We're gonna raid Justin Freakin. Yeah, Igloo, 5 o'clock. You know this. Cracker Barrel opens at 5 o'clock. So stick around for the raid. Make me look good. I appreciate you. Watch the VOD. It'll be up in just about, 10, 15 minutes, and then you can watch the VOD. It was an excellent conversation, And I look forward to speaking with Professor Q in the future. Thanks to everybody who came through. Drink your water, eat your food, take your meds. Doggy loves you, and so do I.